is more for our be able to knowledge share with people that are related with the ICF chapter, our Sacartuelo chapter. But for you to know if you're participating in the event, if you're sharing your insights, and at the end in our open discussion, we will be cutting those sections so it will not be shared with the rest. So no, your privacy will still be, is very important for us, and we will not be sharing that. It's mostly just the knowledge sharing component that will go out there, or even if you want to revisit the material today, you'll be able to do that. So as this is an ongoing conversation, the topic of today of expanding the impact of coaching from leadership development to organizational performance, I want to invite you to use the chat option to just share your thoughts, your insights as they emerge. And at the end, I will create some space for us to have an open conversation. But if there's things that are starting to come up, to bubble, please feel free to share them with a group, and we'll be able to have a conversation at the end. So as you see, our number has continued to grow in terms of our participants. So unfortunately, because of time constraints, I cannot ask each of you to really introduce yourself. So, but I still would love to hear from you. So for those of you who are interested, please just use the chat, drop your name, what is your professional title, and anything that you want to share with us. We would love to know who is joining us around the world today. And about me, so my background is really at the intersection of leadership development, organizational growth, capability development, and strategy execution. I've been for more than 17 years working across industries, cultures, and countries, helping leaders through organizational change, through capability building, and doing people strategy. As Sofo said, I'm an ICF PCC coach, but what has really increased and shaped the work that I do is the realization that even the most capable leaders, they struggle, and not because they lack talent, but because the environment around them sometimes creates friction. And this is the heart of today's conversation that I'm very excited to share with you all today. But before we go further, and before we expand the impact of coaching, I do want to make clear that coaching works, and it works well. So, and given the research that we have seen out there, this is demonstrated. And there's an ICF global study that demonstrates through PwC with Fortune 500 companies around the globe about the impact of coaching. And from all of the people who were actually surveyed, 86% of them reported that they have positive return on investment of coaching. And there's actually a median company return of 5 to 7 times the initial coaching investment. And 70% of these reporters, actually, they said that they have seen improve in their leadership individual performance. So today's conversation is not at all about questioning the value of coaching. I think we all have agreed on that, but it's really about exploring how can we amplify its impact. And that's where the conversation is going to be rooted today. And as we've seen, coaching has become increasingly popular, and leadership development continues to happen. And as we see that there's more and more people development investments, we still often see that companies are still struggling with persistent performance and execution. So this creates a very, very interesting tension that we're noticing. We're often seeing organizations that have strong leaders. They have very capable leaders, that they have experienced professionals with strong intentions, yet on the day-to-day, we're seeing weak execution. The decisions are slower than they're expected to be. The alignment breaks under pressure. There's execution struggles. And this is where a very interesting questions come to us and say, if organizations have capable leaders, why does organizational performance still breaks down? And this is where we begin to shift from individual to the system level. And that's the fundamental reality of today, that organizations are really exploring and experimenting a very different context. As we all have experienced, even since COVID to now, complexity has really increased dramatically. Organizations are working across functions, technologies, geographies, stakeholders, and decisions made in one part of the organization are quickly affecting other sides of the organizations. We have really seen that the pace of change has drastically accelerated. Priorities are changing. Market conditions are changing. World politics are growing and growing. So it's really harder for organizations to adapt, and they have to adapt at a much faster pace than ever before. And we're also seeing leaders struggling because there's increasingly a stakeholder overload. We have multiple voices, competing expectations. There's really a lot of constant coordination demands. And this environment that we see where the organizations are working today is really creating a result in performance. And the performance is really what we're seeing is less shaped by the capability of the leader alone and more increasingly by the capability of the organization to work as a system. So this is really what we're really seeing at an organizational level today. And a really powerful explanation, a way to demonstrate this, and I want to share with you, is actually what Google did in its Aristotle project. I'm not sure if you are aware of this project, but I want to briefly share it with you. So Google was on that quest. They really embarked on the quest to really find the equation of what makes the best teams happen. What is the formula for the best teams to be created? And they really initially thought when they embarked on this quest that it was going to be the teams that had the strongest experts, the best performers, or the right mix of personalities that will be the best performing teams. But the surprise, that they were really surprised when they found the results. And what was really surprising is here, it was that it really did not matter that much of who was in the team, but actually how the teams interacted, how the teams structured the work. What was the experience that the environment around the team gave them? And the most important factor that determined this was psychological safety. For those of us that might not be so aware with the terminology, this is actually whether people feel safe or not to speak up, if they can ask questions, if they can admit mistakes, if they can really challenge their ideas without having fear or being embarrassed or being punished by it. So in other words, performance was no longer really determined by the individual capability, but it was more determined by the environment, the surrounding, and if the surrounding was allowing them to really strive, no, to really be successful where they are. So this is where really we start seeing the importance of the system, because we could have the best and the most capable leaders. As we know, Google has been known to hire the best of the best, Ivy Leagues, pedigrees, bringing them in the great campuses, great resources. But really what was really important to find out what was the environment around them, what was really the key determinant factor and the psychological safety for the creating the best teams to perform. So when I talk about system, like, okay, Marcela, you talk a lot about the system. We're moving from the individual level to the system level. What is really the system? And when I'm talking about this, I'm not referring to technology. I am not referring to the organizational chart. What I'm really referring to here is a set of interconnected elements that shape actually how work happens in an organization. These are the decisions. How are these decisions made? Are decisions escalated often or not? How are the meetings structured? How does the communication flow within the company? Who owns the accountability? Is it shared, or is it one person holds the accountability? How are the incentives structured? Workflows. What are the signals that the leadership behaviors are given? And when all of these elements interact in harmony and when they're aligned, we really see that organizations move faster, they collaborate better, and they're more efficient. But when these elements, when they're not aligned, when they're really not connected properly, is when we start seeing that the friction happens. And this is when we have clients or when we're in organizations that we see that there's certain problems that are recurring problems and they're not isolated events. It's because they're a product of a system constraint and not an isolated case or not an individual capability problem. So we're saying, okay, now I understand the system is really what is really the environment where the problems might be. No, companies can be performing or being constrained. But how can I, as a coach, as a leader, as a HR professional, what are some of those signs that the system has some issues? And these issues actually they come if we want to double click on them to really see, what are really some of those signs of the systems, we can see that the systems arise in patterns. And some of the issues are recurring. And some of the issues are when we look at the meetings and the same decisions are coming back and back to the same forum, this could be a sign that there's actually a systemic issue. Another constraint might be when we see that there's too many people involved for a decision to be made. So let's start thinking like, okay, why do we really, is this decision really requires that many people to be involved? When we see that teams are actually waiting, expecting, rather than moving forward. When we see that meetings become spaces for discussions, but not for decisions to happen. They become forums of discussions, but we see that the result of the meeting is not a decision and is not moving forward. This could also be a sign of a problem with the system. And the patterns. We can start seeing the patterns. What are the execution cycles? How are the meetings structured? So these are some of the signs. And some of these are kind of be isolated moments. But when we start seeing that these issues become the norm, that the organizations are actually behaving with this as a norm, is when we have to start thinking about that if the issue is not an individual capability, but the system itself that is the one exaggerating the problem. So now, as I did mention that this was an ongoing conversation, I want you to take 30 seconds to really think at this point and say, okay, consider your own organizations where you work or consider your clients and think about it. Where is the system holding you or your organization or your clients back? Where do you see that their decisions are getting stuck? Think about the meetings, how they're happening. Do you see that the same decisions are coming and coming to the same meetings without a decision being made? Who owns the ownership of the decision, the architecture of the decisions in your institution? Is it clear who is the one who has to make the decision and at what level? Where do you feel the alignment is taking too long? Is there any initiative that you can think that requires excessive coordination before an action can happen? So let's, all of the things that we have considered so far, let's take a moment to reflect on it and to see, like what are really the things happening? And sometimes these are the silence moments that matter, right? Those uncomfortable moments, but those moments that really made us think, ponder what is really happening. Because sometimes the concept is easier to hear it, but when we try, let's try to really see it in practice in one of our organizations, our clients, and where do we see this happening? And I'm seeing a lot of you are from different places. I see Slovenia, I see Spain is in the house, I see India is in the house, Berlin is in the house. So there might be culture, no things that are also different with this. So yes, please, Nino. You're muted, Nino. I don't know if you wanted to share something. Yes.
You hear my voice, right?
Yes.
So one question which is always catching my eye is, where do decisions get stuck? Per my observation, in the most of the cases, the leadership knows everything, and then they don't share. In most of the cases, they take the responsibilities on themselves, and they are trying to resolve and to lead on their own. So, per my opinion, the decision gets stuck here when they do not share, when they do not do enough brainstorming and include people to make them feel that they are part of the decision and part of the process. So this is what I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else that has any insights that also want to share with the group? So Nino, if we work with your example, you mentioned that
Yeah.
decisions get stuck in the way that you feel that it's just the same group of people calling the shots and maybe not including other people within the organization and taking the responsibility of the execution and not cascading the execution to the right levels. Is this what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, like it's not the sharing in the leadership, but it's not the leadership. It's like the old fashioned management, maybe losing the authority, fear of losing power. So there can be a lot of root causes, right? But it happens a lot, especially in a very big organizations, when sometimes it's even very hard to reach out to everybody, I would say. And yeah, this is I could say the one of the symptoms which causes the stuck of the decision.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else wants to share anything?
Mhm. And I can continue if it's okay. Because yeah, it's resonates with me a lot. So
No,
and about the ownership, when the ownership is not clear, right? Sometimes we do have processes, we do have roadmaps in the organizations, but it's like just saved somewhere on the shelf, right? Sometimes people do not even know that we do have the processes. Sometimes we do not share that, guys, here are the processes, here are your responsibilities. And time to time, we need reminders, right? What we are doing, why we are doing, what the benefit of the thing that we are doing. So, that's why that is the reason sometimes I think that people do not take ownership because they are not clear with the vision and the mission and the values sometimes as well, and here come the conflict, and that's why sometimes we are not ready to take the ownership, and when we are waiting we are just in a flow, happens what happens.
thank you for sharing, Nino. And so just for the sake of us to also be able to move forward, as you're sharing, what we're hearing from you is also that it might not be a capability problem alone of the leader of someone, but it's also the system that is creating the friction. As you say in large organizations, it could be bureaucracy. So you don't know what is the right level to raise an issue. It could be the processes that are unknown. What is the right person to do it? The information of the flow. So once a decision has been made, what is the right way of cascading? So as we're seeing, these are problems that could be patterns of how it is structured, and it's just not based on the individual capability of the person or individual alone, but how is the structure around it, and what is that you're feeling that is not allowing things to move forward. And this is actually where I see that there's a lot of potential now for coaching to really start moving beyond developing the individual to looking at the system level, of what are the enablers around the person, around this, not the complexity to really be able to move forward. So what if we could actually look into it, right? What if we could actually consider what are the ways that coaching can move not only to support the people, but how the organization moves. What if the coaching can actually look at how the decisions flow, how the accountability is owned, how collaboration happens across boundaries. So here we're really expanding the coaching impact, from helping leaders grow to really helping organizations work better. And this is where I really want to bring us forth. And this is really where I see how coaching is evolving. So back in 1995, when the terminology of coaching that we know today as a profession was coined, it was focusing a lot at the individual level. It was focusing on that self-awareness, on the mindset, on the confidence. As coaching started to develop, we see the rise of leadership coaching. And this is where coaching is expanding in towards influence, communication, and team effectiveness. But what we're really seeing also coaching going next, the next frontier of coaching, is really to start moving to that system level of not focusing only on the individual, but on the organization where the individual interacts as a whole. And if we can really shift on and we think ourselves, rather than how to develop better leaders, also if we can start thinking about how do we help organizations function more effectively as systems. So this is where really we really see the potential that coaching has in organizational development in terms of bringing coaching to the next level. And when we talk about systemic coaching and what it really does, systemic coaching focuses on improving how the performance happens across the organization, not only at the individual level, but improving the interactions, the structures, the patterns. So for example, we see in decision making, we can really look why decisions keep escalating, why decisions are not just being made. In strategic alignment, we see, are there conflicting priorities that are happening across functions? Leadership coherence, what are the mixed signals that the leadership is sending out to the organization? Cross-function collaboration, is it happening in harmony? Are there silos happening? And how is the silo behavior really coming to life? And what are also the organizational patterns? What are the execution cycles? How are the meetings being structured? So here our goal as systemic coaching is not only to focus on the individual growth, but to improve on how the organization works better together. And to make this a little bit more clear and understanding for us to see it, I also want to share an example, just like as Nina was sharing some of her insights of what she's seeing in the organizations where she coaches. We're also seeing here, I want to share an example of one of our clients. So this was actually a big international finance institution with more than 50 years of existence, but they were going through a culture transformation initiative. So as you know, a culture transformation initiative is not a project that has a specific owner. It doesn't sit on one side. I'm not talking about the budget or the reporting that okay, the finance department has to come up with it, or the sales department, something. A culture transformation was a project that it required multiple involvement from different stakeholders, but we really needed to see what's happening. So there were some observed challenges when we came in. We thought when we started to work with the leadership team that the execution was happening slower than expected. The decisions and what this group wanted to do, part of this project was they wanted to review some of their business processes and their people policies so that the experience of the employees was more aligned with the new culture they wanted to create. But when we kept meeting the teams, they kept bringing the same decisions. The decisions of identifying which policy they were going to review kept coming and coming. So they kept discussing which policy we need to review, but there was no decision about this is the policy that we will review. They would just keep saying we need to review the policies, we need to review the people practices, but they kept discussing, but it was not moving from there. So it was the same leadership team, same big topic conversation, but it was not moving forward. We felt that the team was really on that waiting mode rather than acting mode. And for changing a policy, you need different functions to work together. You need the strategy team, you need the HR team, or you need the team that is really responsible for the function to work together. And it really felt that it was very heavy, or it was really hard and slow to see that cross-functional collaboration happening. So at the beginning when we see this, the first impression it was that it was actually an issue between the leadership team. We thought there was an issue in execution among the leadership team. But when we did a system diagnosis, we realized that it was not what the surface thought. We thought it was maybe a personality issue, that there were some leaders that they couldn't see eye to eye with the others, and that's why they were not able to collaborate, because we thought, okay, they're competing and they don't want to collaborate. But what we really realized, it was not that the leaders were unclear of what they wanted to do. They knew they wanted to review some policies and some processes so that the culture could be experienced different. So they had clarity, but they were very cautious because they didn't have a clear decision-making architecture. They didn't know who had to make the decision. Okay, we're going to change the process, but which process? So there was not that clear ownership of the decision making. So it was not that they were not clear, they were just very cautious of who has to call the shot. The decisions right were not explicit. They didn't know, okay, what is also the risk appetite? How much risk can we take if we're going to change a policy? Which policy? Should we be bold and change a big policy, or should we start small and just change something small policy? So that risk appetite was also not. And the meetings kept focusing about we need to change. The policies need to change. We have to do things differently. We need to see not things done differently, but not about what is really the performance, what is really the outcome that they want to see different. And the accountability kept to be shared. So they kept meeting as a team, but there was no clear ownership of at the end of the day who had to make the decision. So at this point, what was really the intervention and how coaching at this moment came as a systemic level? So rather than going individually and coaching each of these leaders in isolation, what we did was we coached the team as a system. And how did we do that? We clarified the roles. We said, you're all in here as a team, but who is going to do what? At what point you have to do what? So the roles were, and it was important not for them to also understand their own role, but also the role that the other members were doing in the team. the role, the meaning, and the impact of each of the roles. The meetings were redesigned. We avoided continuing to have meetings as discussion forums, and meetings were more to share outcomes, share what was happening, progress, decide what needs to decide, and how to move on. Ownership was aligned. Since we were talking about a culture transformation, we had to identify where were the different ownership levels for this to happen and at what point they had to happen. And there was also the creation of feedback loops. So everyone could still feel that they were engaged and that no, they were still accountable, they were still knowing what was happening, but they did not always have to be involved when there were already too many people coming for no decision to be made. And it was really great. And this is the power of systemic coaching, because it really, decisions suddenly became faster and they were more clear. Accountability, people know they felt more empowered. Okay, I can do this. I can decide on this. I can call this shot because this is something that I can, this is not part of what I'm expected to do. The friction reduced. Before, as we said, they were not clear, but they were just very cautious. Now they were more empowered to act. They knew where their boundaries were. And it was really clear how they had clarity of what they wanted to move. They knew they wanted to change the experience of the employees, of how their new culture had to be felt. So the strategy really came into action. They were able to identify those policies that were acupuncture points, those policies that they say, okay, if we change this policy, it was going to have the biggest impact about employees. And it really changed. So with this example, what I want to share with you is the power of the systemic work, how really small structural shifts can unlock significant organizational performance. And so what does this really mean? And as I did mention, I know we're all, like many people in the room, I know that we're from different geographies coming together. I'm not sure about if we're all coaches, if we're leaders, if we're actually just trying to manage a team and seeing how can we do that. But it does has meaningful impact for all of us. So for us who are coaches, what does this really mean for you? And it's an invitation to expand your unit of work. You don't have to focus just on the individual itself, right? There's not a need to focus just on the leader that you're working with or the coach, but to really widen your lens from the individual leader to the broader system around it. What is really the complexity, the relationship they have that really enables this leader to perform? Not to work more with the, no, also just not with an individual, with leadership teams, with the decision patterns. Where are the tensions that are happening? How do you really are able to move across the organization forward? It also means that we can contract differently. So we can start not only focusing on what is the leadership capability that we want to develop, as the traditional coaching does, but also start thinking about what is the performance outcome we're trying to enable? What are the system conditions that are getting in the way for this person to really move forward? So this is for us coaches to think. But if you're a leader, or if you're part of a team, or if if you manage a group of people, you're in the organizational development, this also has implications that are equally important to you. And it's the realization that your system drives performance. That is not just a matter of mindset. You can be very capable, you can have the right skill sets and attitude and motivation, but the system is also responsible for driving performance around you. So when that coaching can really improve how this happens, right? Coaching can improve to how the decisions are made, how the meetings are structured, how accountability is led, and how in order to really reduce that friction that is happening. And also for you to realize that execution is also a design challenge and not only a performance issue. People might be, no, they might be very self-aware. They might have the capabilities that they need, but they also need that environment that allows them to move forward, to really be able to do there. So this is what I really want to make sure that I want to stop here. And I want us to reflect again, to be able to absorb of where we are. And for us who are coaches, to really think about and consider, where do you see the greatest opportunity for coaching to expand its impact? From what you have heard, from what you're thinking, from all of the information that is just coming to your head, where do you really see, not that we can really create this biggest impact? Or if you have any questions that you want us to address as a group or me myself, I'm also happy to do that. Let me see. Nino, has anything changed in the way that you were thinking before? And has anything?
Well, I cannot say that like changed, but I am reflecting right now. I'm thinking and that systemic approach gives totally different picture, really. Sometimes it happens that you're coaching executives and it appeared that um, they have not enough power to make changes, maybe in roles, maybe in some kind of processes. So as you have now described, it makes me think that systemic coaching will give the broader picture. It's like a zoom out to define where you can do changes, where you cannot do changes, but who are the persons who can support you, that you together can do something beneficial for the company, for yourself, for your team, and so on.
Great. Thank you. And as you said it, as coaches, we're also here not to provide the solutions, but we're here to actually help them identify those patterns, help them identify what's really the zoom out that you were saying. What is really no out of there when we start feeling, when we're seeing that the problems are recurring, that the problems are starting to be repetitive, we can help them see that it might not be just an individual capability issue, but it's actually a system constraint. So what are those bigger complexity and connection that can help that is really affecting and draw the patterns for them with them? Natalia.
Yes, I have a question. Maybe from your experience working with the whole system, is the work of coach connected with some KPIs? So to see when coach come to organization to help leaders, to help the system to move forward, to come from like output to outcomes, yeah, to deliver really value. How is it with numbers, with KPIs? Because when I looked at slides before, it's really great. It's like what usually agile coaches are doing when they support the company. But it's always like human side, the whole organization. But what is with the number? How do you understand that we really helped organization to move forward with numbers?
Thank you for that. And I think also that's a great question that we also have to address as coaches and the elephant in the room. At the end of the day, we're still hired to deliver an outcome. No, there's still a problem that they want us to help see. And if we're able to quantify to help our clients see the result, that is much better. But what I will really encourage at this point is because each organization is has a different system. The system kind of, unfortunately, there's not like a generic equation of what it is. I will encourage you to really identify what is the KPI that this institution needs the most. We already have identified what are the different components of the system in in the systemic coaching, and identify for this institution what are for the constraints that we were looking. We had like 5 constraints that we look into it. What are the ones that are repeating the most? So we identify what's the issue. And then from what are the different elements that they have to come up, which is the ones that they feel that if we address these ones first, the other ones will follow. And with that, create KPIs that will be relevant for that institution, for that problem itself. Because you do want to make it sure, and if it's, for example, one of the cases, for example, for this cultural development, what we did, because it was for culture, it was created in staff engagement. So it was linked to the staff engagement survey. So when there was a survey done at the beginning, say, okay, after the entire process, the staff engagement survey will happen again. And we expect to see they wanted to see a minimum of 5 points increase in the staff engagement survey and employee satisfaction. So for this example, actually, it was really amazing. There was a 12-point increase. But at least if you're able to quantify, to know what the problem is, I cannot tell you always staff engagement survey, right? Because that might not be the case. You have to be really, what is the systemic issue that you're trying to address, and connect it with something. It could be typical things that could be like that. How many layers? Like if there's a decision architecture for some problems, like who do you really need to escalate that problem until when? Or how many meetings, do this meeting, if there's this type of decision, does it require a board meeting to decide on this? Or does it require just a team meeting to decide on this? So actually one of the typical KPIs, it could actually be of that decision architecture, or it could be ownership. Who owns the decision? Does it has to be a consensus decision, certain topics, or it has to be individual can call the shots? Sometimes they put money pegged to it, right? So they say, if the decision is tied to money, if the decision is less than $50,000, an individual can make it. If the decision is more than 51 plus, then this group of people has to come together to approve it. Do they really? So the decision communication flow. So there's different ways of actually quantify it, but I think that is actually great for clients so they can really see and measure how how the organization is really working better by using this approach. I hope this helps, but feel free to to elaborate further, or if you have any ideas to share with the group as well.
Thank you. Thank you. It's clear. I think this engagement survey, it's in all big companies to measure. And when we measure, it's usually like from 1 to 5, from 1 to 10. Yeah, it's quantitative, but not so like connected with some real business money. You know, people could be more engaged, they feel more empowered, but still like KPIs about business performance is not so good. So how to find this, as a coach, we know that it's important when people are engaged, they feel more happy, they have more psychological safety in the teams. But if they don't deliver business value, so then
Perfect. Agree. And I also think, but I think this is part of also where kind of the ICF competencies do come to us. I think and we don't want to cross the border from being the coach to becoming the consultant, right? In that sense of telling them, okay, you have to do it because this is the KPI that you have to set. I think for us as coaches is to help them bring those patterns to life, identify what are the issues, identify where is that they have to really target the solutions. But I think we cannot become prescriptive at this moment and say, okay, you have to peg it with money. This is where it is to be. Of course, from the understanding and experience from working with other clients, we have some ideas, but I think this is where we have to work with them to create the right solution and equation for them at that moment. Thank you. Sudeep, I noticed you turn on your camera. Is there anything that you want to share?
No, I just in a position now to show my background, so I.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here with us. Georgi, any thoughts? What is coming to your head?
Greetings, everyone. I was just thinking about my experience. Like recently, I had such kind of case. There was a middle management in a company, and they needed some kind of decision which one was essential for this company and for their success. But what was the point that in high management, no one wanted to call the shots. Yeah. So no one wanted to be in the charge because they thought that that kind of issue was some kind of hot potato or pain in the neck, and just no one wanted to be in the charge. But this task was really essential one. So in this case, how we have to act? What can we do to help, like, to improve communication between middle management and high management, and to persuade them that it's a necessary one, it's essential one. Without this decision, they can't achieve success. Yep. But no one wants to be responsible for it. So what can we do in this case?
Thank you for that. And that's kind of another issue that we're having here. And this is where you start first. Like, are you sharing the idea as talking to a leader and knowing that the leader doesn't want to make a decision? Or is this an organizational problem that it has been given to you? So these are different lenses, right? If you're working with a person and the person doesn't want to make the decision, or if you're working is the organization is telling you nobody's making decisions. So I think that's also, like, if you could clarify with us, what is the starting point? I think that's very important for us to know.
I'm talking about that they need some kind of decision, but this decision can't be made by middle management. Yep, they need some kind of leader. In high management, there are different kind of leaders, like different kind of directors or stakeholders, but no one wants to be in charge because everyone knows that it's hot potato and everyone tries to avoid it. Yep. So I mean, in that case, for example, there are 4 or 5 leaders. Yep. So 4 or 5 different managers, and all of them try to avoid this decision. But it's essential one. And everyone knows it. And everyone is waiting for another, like, oh my God, like, I can wait for them. Maybe some other manager will do something instead of me. What's in this case?
Sure, thank you for that. So what you're describing is kind of what we talked about yesterday before, which was, okay, the same problem keeps happening. The same problem, that the same problem is coming and coming, but nobody's making the decision. So you're like there, you have 4 to 5 people involved, but nobody's really calling the shot, like really making that decision forward. But we have to identify, why is this happening? Is it really because nobody wants to be accountable, or nobody knows who is really the person responsible? So we have to start identifying if it's an individual person, like capability, or if it's because the ownership, there's no clarity of who the person who has to make the decision, or there's no incentive for the person to make the decision. So we have to really start saying, though, I will invite you to kind of start not immediately pinpointing this is the problem, but really work with the clients to figure it out. What is really causing the problem in here? Is it because they're cautious? Because maybe there's a fear of making the decision? Is it because they don't know who the right person is supposed to be making the decision? Because they're used to have everything decided as a team, but not someone to really be the one who has to say something at the end. So I will really kind of invite you to start opening up these questions, these different, to identify what's really the pain point that is happening. Or if you know what, feel free to keep sharing with us.
Okay, and I have one more question. If you can imagine that you are in my shoes, so what would you do? I mean, from what to start to work face to face with each leader, I mean, separately, or we need some kind of group coaching in this case? Which one is better?
Also depends how the problem has arrived, because if a problem came to you, might be because you have already been working with the leader itself, so you have a closer relationship with one of these more than the other. But if this is a systemic issue, you do need to bring a group together, and this might not be a specific intact team. This might be actually who are the key stakeholders that are responsible for this decision. I don't know the decision that you have, but if you know this decision has to be made, who are the responsible people that need to be involved for this decision to be made? And then what you can start doing is going through that kind of checklist of what are the system constraints. So you start analyzing, okay, I noticed that this problem continues to come and come, but there's no resolution. Is it because are there too many people involved? If you actually give it to less people, will the decision actually maybe move forward? Is it because they're waiting for someone else? Maybe they're waiting for an external stakeholder to make the decision to really bring it. And maybe the person actually they're waiting to make the decision is not within this team. So I will invite you to really start first asking for this decision to be made, who needs to be involved? And then bringing that everyone that needs to be involved, then you can really start working with the team and saying, and is this meeting? So you start thinking about, okay, are they used to have meetings just for discussing, and like to sharing ideas? Or are they really, the purpose of this meeting is to come up with a decision? So you really start saying, okay, for you, manage the expectations. What's the purpose of this meeting? You might need a couple of them because you first need to build rapport. They need to create that psychological safety that they really can. If it's a team that they're not used to, come together, okay, come together. And then what is really gonna be the process for you to be able to make a decision? But then need to know that by the third meeting, the decision has to be made. So you can really start working with them to move forward to that.
Okay, thanks. And you know what's complicating everything? That there are 4 leaders and all of them are from different countries, which means different traditions, different approaches. And I think they have some kind of problem with the communication. So maybe I will suggest them to start to improve their communication just among them and not with employees.
And thank you for bringing that, which is a critical component when we're talking about system or, intercultural teams. For example, trust. In some teams, if you just bring the team together, a small team, they think there's a trust because they're a small team. But in some cultures, you have my trust until you break my trust. While in other cultures, you have to build the trust. You start with no trust from me, but you have to build and earn my trust. So even these things are important to understand, or who is part of this team that needs to make a decision. What are their perspectives? For them, what does it mean to make a decision? For them, it could actually be, as you said, a hot potato, just pass it to the next person. For some of them, actually means I want to have the liberty to be able to choose. For other ones might be, no, we need to create consensus. So really, you might even want to know for each of them, what does making a decision means? One person might actually want to be given the power to decide, while others might actually be expecting that it has to be a consensus. So even all of these assumptions need to be cleared out for the team to be able to work effectively. And this is where what we talk about, it doesn't matter who is in the team, but the experience that they're having from the environment around them.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. It's really useful, your explanation.
Thank you for that. So we're really coming to an end. It is really, we're almost there, but we have 3 minutes left. This is a QR code if you want to connect. This will bring you to my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to send us a connection request and we can take the conversation further if you have any questions or if you want to bounce ideas. I hope this has been more than a lot of information, more like starting to make you ponder, really giving you maybe more questions than answers to really be able to think, how can we all as coaches, as leaders, really be able to increase the impact of coaching? So thank you very much. If you have any final questions, feel free, or any thoughts. And if not, it has been great to be here with you today.
Thank you. Marcel, a quick question.
Yes.
There were lot of nuggets that I can borrow, cheat from what you presented. So, candid question, will you be sharing the presentation or is it possible to get particular parts of it? I can write what the use will be for.
So we don't have a sign-up sheet, so I don't really have all of the emails of you. But if you actually send me a message to Deep, on LinkedIn, feel free. We can actually.
Sure.
I'm more than happy to share some of it with you.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll explicitly mention what I'm looking for.
Sure, I will
just
be
thought
happy.
it's something I can borrow rather than
Sure.
build it. Yeah.
Let's not
Thank you so
reinvent.
much.
Let's not reinvent the
Yeah.
wheel. Let's move forward and
Yeah.
propel each other. Let's propel us rather than taking us each other back. Thank you for that. Anything else, Sofo? Anything else that you want to say to finish?
Maybe we can finish now. Thank you, Marcella, for your valuable contribution and so inspiring sharing. And I want also to say thanks to all of our participants to be with us today. So I hope we will see again, we will see each other again to the next webinars. So bye-bye.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.